Good morning, or I might even say good evening, or possibly good afternoon. It all depends when you chose to watch this video. And thank you for taking the time. I know life is busy and you receive hundreds of emails. I do want to take a moment, though, to place into context the events of last weekend at Westwood Church. Our children did a magnificent job presenting to us the musical Speak. I was wowed by their giftedness and impressed with Pastor Dan, the children's ministry team, and what they had put together. But I also felt the challenge that they gave us. We are called to serve the world through reaching out. And I know that every week, as the children prepared to rehearse their lines and sing their songs, the children's ministry team reminded them this was about serving the world through reaching out. That's what the theme of the musical was about. I sent you a letter this week. You may not have received it yet. If you didn't, you'll get it in the next couple of days. It talks about the utilization of a very simple tool to help us in the midst of the noise and the busyness to really live out this passion to serve the world through reaching out. It's called an impact list. An impact list is where we intentionally look at 1 to 3 people God has already placed in our lives, a friend, a relative or associate, who don't have a relationship with Christ or who presently aren't attending church. And what we do is we focus our efforts of praying for them, of looking for ways to care for them, of sharing our lives with them, and as well sharing the story of what God has done for them. Now, I know systems sometimes can make it feel somewhat programmatic. And I think we need to remember it really is ultimately about sharing the love of God. We want every person who surrounds us to know God values them. We want every person who is in our lives to know they're sought after by God. We want every person that God gives the privilege of living in relationship with to know that God desires to celebrate giving them of new life. It feels good to know those things. I know as you reflect upon your own personal story, that sense of love and value and being sought after and celebrated changes you, transforms you. We want to make sure that's what it's all about. We want people to know they're loved, they're valued, they're sought after, and they're celebrated. It reminds me of a great story in the Scriptures. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's the story of the prodigal son. This man has 2 children. The youngest of the 2 basically comes to his father and says, I sure wish you would kind of die because then I would get what I really want, which is all of that money, all of that inheritance. The father chooses to give him his inheritance early. The son leaves home, breaking that relationship with his father, snubbing his nose at his love and his care, and he goes out and lives the life that he thought would bring him joy and contentment. And before long, he loses everything. Those who he thought were his friends no longer were there to take care of him and love him and care for him. He's dejected. He's all by himself. He finds himself living on a farm, eating what the pigs have left over in their trough. And all of a sudden, he thinks about home. He says, you know, even in my own home, the servants that work for my father live a better life than I live. And so he gets up, dirty, filthy, broken. He begins to walk his journey home. And before long, as he approaches his father's home, his father sees him in the distance. This son who had said, I wish you were dead, this son who had said, I want nothing to do with you, nothing you have to offer with me, is walking down the road, broken, rejected, filthy. And the son and the father then, as he sees his son, is filled with love. And rather than recounting what he had done, rather than recounting the injustice of his remarks, the wrongfulness of his actions, the father runs to his son, his arms open wide. And as he approaches his son and as he comes into his presence, he wraps his arms around him, communicating to him, I know who you are. I love you. You are valued. I am so glad you are home. Now, that's the father's response, and that really is what this idea of an impact list is all about. How do we let people know that God loves them? That God desires to wrap his arms around them and to communicate to them that he loves them, he values them, he seeks after them, he celebrates their life and the life he wants to give to them. Sadly enough, there's another character in the story, and that's the younger son's older brother. And as he watches this whole thing going on between dad and this rebellious younger brother, his arms are crossed across his chest, and he's filled with judgment not only toward the younger son, but also toward his loving father. More importantly than any impact list, I pray that we have the opportunity to express that kind of love that the Father expressed. Sadly enough, if we're not careful, we can end up looking and sounding like that eldest son. As we take a look at what we call lostness around ourselves, if we're not careful, we can find ourselves folding our arms across our chest, looking down at people with a sense of disgust, and taking confidence in what we think we've accomplished. Let's be those loving fathers rather than the eldest son. And recognize that as we reach out to those around us, we're impacting how they view God himself. When they know they're valued and sought after and celebrated, they see God as a loving Father. Now, I look forward to seeing you this weekend. We've got more in store for you about this idea of lost. Forrest Shell from Paraguay will be with us. We'll be talking about his personal call to missions. Why has he accepted this call to go to the ends of the world to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ? Looking forward to seeing you. Don't forget, we have Saturday night service at 6 o'clock and Sunday morning services at 9 and 10:45. God blessings to you.